July 15th session of the San Carlos Planning Commission is called to order. Will you please stand and face the flag and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Welcome, everyone. Staff, roll call.
Yes, and this evening, Chair John Dugan is not available, so Vice Chair Jim Iacopone will be chairing the meeting this evening. And I'll go ahead and start with a roll. Commissioner Roof.
Present.
Commissioner Garvey.
Present.
Commissioner Bradley.
Present.
Vice Chair Iacopone.
Present. Our first item on the agenda tonight is public comment. Public comment is limited to items not on the agenda. The Commission may briefly respond to statements made or questions posed as allowed by the Brown Act. However, the Commission's general policy is to refer items to staff for attention or have the matter placed on a future Commission agenda for a more comprehensive action or report. Does anyone here in the audience have something that they'd like to comment on here in the open comment period? Yes. Yes, please. Yeah, please. That'd be great. Thank you. And just to check, this is for something not on tonight's agenda, yes? Great. Please.
I didn't even finish filling you out. But
That's right. If you could step up to the mic, just introduce yourself, that'd be great.
okay. Hi, I'm Joanna, and I'm with Menlo Spark, which is a nonprofit environmental advocacy organization in Silicon Valley. So yeah, I just wanted to come to you as a member of Menlo Spark, but more importantly as a person concerned about Silicon Valley perceived apathy towards changing climate. As I'm sure you're all aware, we're in the middle of a climate crisis. CO2 levels have reached the highest they've ever been in human history. It's easy to imagine this climate crisis is a faraway problem, but it's not. Last year's record-setting wildfires in California were linked in part to increasing temperatures and prolonged dry periods. Severe air quality issues affected many aspects of daily life. More than 1 million public school students were out of school due to fires, including schools in San Mateo, Hillsborough, and Burlingame. Forest fires are just the start. California's major droughts, global temperature rise, warming oceans, shrinking ice sheets, an increase in storms, and sea level rise will all have a drastic effect at a local and global level. While this is a lot of scary news, there is still hope, although we have to start now. I want to take the time to highlight the importance of adopting building REACH codes. REACH codes enable all-electric, carbon-free buildings that make our buildings safer, healthier, and more affordable, as well as help meet local climate action plan goals. It will also defend the city against costly and uncertain supplies of natural gas and make San Carlos a leader for cities throughout the U.S. As of right now, more than 15 cities are working with Peninsula Clean Energy, Silicon Valley Clean Energy, and technical consultants to help reach REACH codes in time to sync up with the new statewide Title 24 standards that will go into effect January 1st, 2020. I hope that San Carlos' representative for Peninsula Clean Energy, Laura Palmer-Lohan, will continue to show leadership and help bring the city to a brighter future. I sincerely hope that San Carlos will consider REACH code seriously, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other public comment? Great, thank you. The next item on our agenda is the review and approval of minutes from last Planning Commission meeting. Colleagues, any comments to add?
I'll move that we accept the minutes as read.
I'll second that.
Before the roll, staff has a comment. I just noticed this. Just on the regular template, on the first page of the draft minutes, I just would like to note there needs to be a correction under the names of the commissioners to ensure that we capture for the record that Don Bradley was in attendance at this meeting on Monday, July 1st. I notice his name is not on there.
Well spotted, thank you very much. Any other comment? Oh, sorry, I think we had a motion and a second. Roll.
Correct, I'm next. Commissioner Roof.
Yes.
Commissioner Garvey.
Yes.
Commissioner Bradley,
Yes.
and Vice Chair Iacopone.
Yes. So passed and recorded. Very good. Tonight, we have, we're going to move to our public hearing section. We have 2 items on our agenda tonight. The procedure for the public hearing is that staff will present a report on the history, physical features, et cetera, on the application, following with staff's recommendations on the topic. The applicant has the opportunity to make a presentation, and therefore, afterward, interested members of the community may speak out on the proposal at hand. When all of the interested parties have had the opportunity to be heard, then we'll close the public comment part of the hearing, and no further discussion from the floor can be held at that time, after that time. The commission will then consider the evidence and make its recommendation. If you challenge a public hearing item in court, you may be limited to raising only those issues you or someone else raised at the public hearing described in this notice. The public notice or in written correspondence delivered to the city at or prior to the public hearing. Speakers would be asked to please fill out a speaker's form. They're located in the back. Prior to addressing the commission, bring them on up at the time when it's appropriate, and or pass them to staff, and we'll make sure that you are in the queue to have your comments heard. And then the speaker should please come up to the microphone and speak, since this meeting is being recorded, and this will assist staff in preparing the minutes for the evening. So thank you very much. And our first measure tonight is regarding 1091 Industrial Road. That's APN 046151060, and the Planning Commission is being asked to consider a resolution recommending the City Council adopt an ordinance rezoning the site from planned development, PD designation, to general commercial industrial, or GCI, and rescind the planned development plan. So
Thank you very much for the introduction. Lisa Costa-Sanders, Principal Planner. I'll be giving the staff presentation this evening.
I could just quickly interrupt with one disclosure statement. Back in 2016, Premia Capital, the applicant before us this evening, was a client. In running this issue past the city attorney, I understand that I don't need to recuse myself because so many years have passed, but in the interest of transparency, I felt I should disclose it, so I wanted to do that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. So the subject site is just under 1.6 acres in area, and it's located at the corner of Industrial Road and Britton Avenue. The site is currently developed with a 40,000 square foot, 2-story commercial building. And then the site is also bordered by Pulgus Creek and is near the Highway 101 on and off ramp. The City Council approved a hotel development back in 2017 and also approved an amended project in early 2018 to increase the development to 173 guest rooms. The entitlements included rezoning the site from general commercial industrial to planned development and approving the planned development plan, as well as the Planning Commission approval of design review, transportation demand management plan, and a mitigated negative declaration. The zoning code requires that all planned development districts have an accompanying and a valid planned development plan. No other uses are allowed in that PD district except as authorized by the PD plan. The PD plan, though, does expire after 2 years, and so that's due to expire, this PD plan, in January of next year. However, the planned development zoning does not expire. That zoning district continues. It would be ineffective in this situation with an expired PD plan, though. And the city attorney and I have spoken about that in the future. I think we've been here over 30 years. We don't recall any time a planned development plan has not been utilized. So this is a new situation to us. But we talked about in the future, we could put into the PD zoning that it would expire after 2 years unless that planned development plan was effective. So the request before you this evening is to rezone the site from planned development back to the former zoning designation of general commercial industrial. Unfortunately, the hotel developer that secured that planned development zoning determined it was just too costly to build the hotel at that location, and they decided to sell the property. The current property owner requests the city rezone the site back to the former designation of general commercial and industrial. And then they also request that the city rescind that approved planned development plan. If the rezoning is approved, the property owner plans to submit an application to develop either an office or an R&D building in the site that would be compliant with the general commercial industrial regulations. This new development will still require a planning commission consideration of design review, as well as TDM plan and the appropriate CEQA analysis. While the property was on the market, we discussed several options with the property owner as well as other interested parties. So they could either develop the hotel as was approved, they could utilize the planned development zoning and take advantage of that additional height and floor area that the planned development zoning allows and come in with a new planned development plan. That would still require planning commission and city council consideration, but it would give them the advantage of the additional height and floor area that was previously authorized. And then finally, they have the option to request the site be rezoned, which is what the current property owner is electing to do. And just give you a little comparison of the PD zone that was approved, what that authorized compared to what the GCI regulations that you're looking to rezone it to would permit. So it allowed going 80 feet to top of parapet where the zoning is 50 feet. There is some height allowances in the GCI zoning that allows you to go up to 66 feet to top of mechanical, but that does have some step-ins. And then also the PD plan included a 10-foot top of creek setback, whereas the general regulations have 25 feet. However, the Planning Commission does still have the opportunity to approve different setbacks from the creek. The floor area was approved at 2.46 of the site, and GCI is 2.0. And then there was also an increase in the signage, more than doubling what the 150 square feet that's allowed. We took a look at the CEQA and determined that it was exempt as the project is consistent with the general plan and the general plan environmental impact report. So the general plan for the site designation is also general commercial industrial. We did mail and post the public notice in the newspaper. The mailing was done on July 3rd and published on July 4th, and I have received no public comments to date on this project. And here is the motion, should you choose to make it. As indicated, the project is a recommendation by Planning Commission and a decision by City Council. I'd be happy to try to answer any of your questions, and the property owner is also here this evening.
Thank you, Lisa. Colleagues, any questions for staff at this time? Would the property owner applicant want to come on up and make a statement?
Us. My name is Mike Hallow. I'm one of the owners of the property. Ellen, I don't remember you. I'm so sorry. I feel guilty. But I represent the ownership group. It's odd for developers to be up here requesting downzoning, but we're here. It gives us clarity. And we owned a life science project in San Carlos on the east side of the freeway. And so that's ultimately our intent. We're local commercial developer. We have 16 projects, all within 5 miles of here. And in fact, we used to office on Industrial Road in a building that's now been knocked down where Meridian 25 is. So that's our long-term intent. We're not in the hotel chain business, and so we're happy with a clear set of guidelines, even if it means lower density and lower height. So we're available for questions if you have them. And thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Just one for me, and that would be, what do you anticipate the development to be? Multiple suites, one company? Do you have a vision of how it might turn out?
Sure. Right now, life science is really low vacancy across the Bay Area, and there's a lot of demand for the south part of the peninsula. And so what we owned on the east side of the freeway, 75, 125 Shoreway, was small suites. And there's demand for that, and then there's larger demand. And so when we build something, we kind of design it with flexibility for both, and then let the market speak. But generally, we're talking about a 3-story building. Lab uses in terms of parking and traffic are lower density because labs, you work in a lab and then you go back to your office. And so it's just a little bit different of a profile from office. And then we'd be proposing subterranean parking, and it'll go through a whole community input and planning process, but it'll be a nice looking building. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, good, very good. Thank you. That's great. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Any other members of the public like to share a comment? Seeing none, anyone offer a motion to close public comment?
Yes, I would like to move that the Planning Commission adopt the resolution recommending the City Council adopt an ordinance rezoning the site from planned development, PD, to general commercial industrial, GCI, and rescind the planned development plan at 1091 Industrial Road, APN 046151060, based on the required findings.
I'll second that.
Excuse me, through the chair. Just for the record, I like to, it's good practice to actually have a motion to close the public hearing first, so that it's clear that the record is now closed before you vote on the action item. Before you decide to suggest that we put the motion in abeyance until we can close the public hearing, and then we can redo this. We don't have to restate it, but you can reconsider that motion.
I'll move that we close the public hearing.
I'll second that.
Commissioner Roof?
Yes.
Commissioner Garvey?
Yes.
Commissioner Bradley?
Yes.
Vice Chair Iacoponi?
Yes.
Now we can go back to the main motion, and you do not have to restate it. Just for the record, that the motion still stands. I take it, Commissioner.
It stands.
A roll call?
Commissioner Roof?
Yes.
Commissioner Garvey?
Yes.
Commissioner Bradley?
Yes.
Vice Chair Iacoponi?
Yes. So passed. Congratulations, and good luck with the development. Now for the second item on tonight's agenda. This is with regard to property at 2520 Melody Drive. This is an appeal of the Planning Division's decision that the subject property is not within the Hillside Overlay District. So we'll start with staff presentation and comment.
Thank you, Vice Chair Iacoponi. My name is Lisa Porras, Planning Manager, and I will be presenting this item to the Commission this evening. And again, the application before you is indeed an appeal of the Planning Division's decision that the property at 2520 Melody Drive does not meet the city's Hillside Overlay applicability criteria, which would then mean that the Hillside Overlay District's allowances for additional height and natural state requirements would also not apply to the subject property. The appeal was filed by the property owner of 2520 Melody Drive, Mr. Daniel Aref, who is here this evening and will be making a presentation to the Commission later this evening. The action before the Commission is to consider the information and reasoning behind staff's decision, as well as reasons presented by the appellant, Daniel Aref, and staff is recommending that the Planning Commission uphold staff's decision and deny the appeal. The property at 2520 Melody sits on a 7,404 square foot lot. There is an existing two-story residence on the site, and the site is surrounded by other similar single-family homes. The general plan land use designation is single-family and has a corresponding zoning designation of RS6, single-family residential. So just a bit of background before we get started on the technical information. The applicant, Mr. Daniel Aref, originally filed an application back on November 29th, 2018 for design review in order to receive a design review permit to construct an approximate 1,000 square foot upper story addition that would have required review by the city's Design Residential Review Committee. The elevation on the right-hand side of the screen was submitted as part of the original application, showing the applicant's plans to construct that upper story addition that would reach a height of approximately 34 feet, 9 inches. And just to clarify, I did want to mention that staff did not deny the original application. Instead, we had several conversations and sent some written correspondence informing the applicant that staff found the site not to meet the city's Hillside Overlay District applicability criteria. We offered to continue to review any revised plan that he would have wanted to submit. However, the applicant decided to forego our offer and instead decided to file an appeal. These next couple of slides are images that were also provided originally as part of the first application received, and the areas that are highlighted reference that proposed upper story addition that the applicant would prefer to construct. And these are just provided for context only. I recognize that the commission did receive some correspondence from some neighbors concerning massing of the building, but that conversation would only come into play should the commission find that the site did indeed meet the Hillside Overlay District applicability, which would then be under the authority of the RDRC at a subsequent meeting, should that be the case. At the time the applicant filed his original application, he provided a site plan. And this image here on the screen is the applicant's proposed site plan, which shows an outline of the building with a red line across the building depicting the steepest slope across the building's footprint. However, as you can see in this site plan, no elevation points or survey data indicating what the measurements were taken from was provided. So in staff's review, when we originally started looking at this application, we needed to determine whether the property met the criteria for being within the Hillside Overlay District and therefore being able to take advantage of additional height, including some of the other provisions that are set forth in the Hillside Overlay District. So we reviewed the applicant's site plan, we took a look at the Hillside Overlay District applicability standards, and basically the standards that are set forth in the zoning ordinance state that the site must have a footprint, and this means the building footprint, must have a footprint slope or a street to setback gradient, which actually means the edge of the pavement to the front setback. Both of those, in either case, both of those areas would be required to have a slope of 19.9% or greater in order to take advantage of some of the development standards found in the Hillside Overlay District. The zoning ordinance also states that the footprint slope is to be measured at the steepest point between opposite sides of the buildings. So if we look at these two example diagrams that are provided on the screen, the diagram somewhat in the middle of the screen shows different elevation points, and a line is drawn between the highest elevation point down to the lowest elevation point. And to calculate percent slope, we take a look at that change in the elevation relative to the distance between those 2 points. And I'll get into some calculations that we did in just a minute. So because that original site plan that I just previously showed did not have elevation points or markers, staff requested a survey from the applicant in order to review and verify that the project did meet the applicability criteria for the Hillside Overlay to apply. And when we received this survey, we realized that the applicant is using the elevation points that are highlighted in this survey and circled in red, with the numbers provided. The low point used is actually at the bottom of what appears to be a concrete ditch, as is stated in the survey, a concrete ditch that's adjacent to the home, and the upper point is at the top wall, is at the top of a planter wall just adjacent to the home. When we looked at the change in elevation between these 2 points, we found that the distance, the change in elevation is actually 12.88. And when we divided that by the distance across the building, which is shown in this survey as 59.11, the result is a footprint slope of 21.8, which would, in fact, meet the minimum 19.9% required. However, staff had concerns about the viability of the points used for calculation, especially the planter area, and requested the applicant to submit some additional information, specifically photos, so we can get a better look at those elevation points. This slide here shows photos that were provided by the applicant so that staff could get a better understanding of the relationship of the planter as compared to the grade or ground relative to the building footprint. So in this next slide here, staff is showing that photograph that was provided by the applicant with a couple of elevation points that are shown in the survey. And upon review of the photos that the applicant submitted, we were able to clarify that indeed the applicant was proposing to use the top of the wall of a planter as the highest point, as opposed to an elevation that's actually located at finished grade or on the ground. We found that the top of the wall adjacent to the building was not an appropriate elevation point to use for the footprint slope calculation. The top of the planter is approximately 3 feet higher than the finished grade surrounding the planter, which is at an elevation of 110.38. And I just would like to add that that elevation point was taken off the survey. The elevation point of 110.38 was taken off the survey that the applicant provided to us. If the calculation was done using the elevation point of 110.38 as compared to the lowest point, the footprint slope would be 17%, which would actually be less than the 19.9 minimum required in order to trigger the hillside overlay applicability criteria. In addition to reviewing the information that the applicant provided, the photos and the survey, we also took a close look at relevant definitions that are provided and set forth within the zoning ordinance, specifically building, the definition for building, the definition for footprint. We also looked at and went ahead to do a little bit more of a deeper investigation at what does grade mean, adjacent grade, existing grade, finished grade, and so forth. All of these definitions that are shown on this slide can actually be found in the packet on packet page 28. So staff finds that the planter doesn't constitute an exterior building wall or supporting column, so it can't meet the criteria for the measurement of the building's footprint slope. In addition, the slope refers to a site's topography or grade, or in other words, the ground. And based on the definitions within the zoning ordinance, staff did not find that the planter is actually part of finished grade or the ground, but is instead a contrived device used to create a grade where none exists. As far as public comment is concerned, initially, as we require for any single-family application, we require neighborhood outreach. And so back in November, the applicant did reach out to neighbors to notify them about the proposed project, an upper story addition. And at that time, staff did receive a letter, but the letter didn't have any concerns. However, staff did receive emails and phone calls from one neighbor and I think a few other neighbors representing a larger group about concerns with the proposed project's height and massing. And then on June 20th, the same neighbor requested a public records, filed a public records request to get information about the appeal, and then subsequently sent a letter and included some information to the Planning Commission, which is also included in your packet and you received through the email. And for this particular hearing, staff did issue a notice of appeal. We mailed all property owners within 300 feet of the site on July 3rd, and this was also published in a local newspaper on July 4th. So this is a suggested motion should you choose to uphold the Planning Division's decision that the project is not within the Hillside Overlay District. I am available for questions, and the project applicant is also here tonight, and I know that he would like to make a presentation as well. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Lisa. Colleagues, questions for staff at this time?
Just one at this time. Are there any other Hillside Overlay District lots or sites built on in this neighborhood or nearby, within the 300 feet, let's say?
I would have to comb through the records. Staff didn't go through and determine if any of the homes within that area were developed using the city's Hillside Overlay applicability criteria. I know that some of those standards were more fine-tuned as recently as 2011. I'm not quite sure when those homes were built there, but I will say that it's quite possible maybe for a site that's, further down the street or on a different lot to be able to take advantage of the Hillside Overlay criteria, simply because each lot is unique and the slope and topography of each lot can vary. But to answer your question, no, we didn't do an analysis of the surrounding homes.
Thank you.
I'd like to understand a little bit better about the relevance of whether the area where the where the applicant's proposing to measure the elevation, the planter, if it doesn't constitute an exterior building wall, I'm wondering what the relevance of that is, because I could imagine a house that's built on a slope would be cut into the hillside a little, and therefore the natural slope would be higher than the bottom of the footprint of the house. And so so to require that you measure from the bottom of the footprint of the house, to me that didn't seem to add up, and I'm wondering if my interpretation of how the footprint is defined works.
Yeah, a footprint is generally defined as the area that is covered by structure, and building footprint is used in this case as part of the Hillside Overlay applicability criteria as a term used to measure across the building. So it could be interpreted that the footprint, the actual area underneath the house, if there aren't data points for directly underneath the house, is perfectly acceptable to take elevation points that are just to the exterior of the house, just outside the building wall. However, in our interpretation, the key deciding factor is that they needed to be at grade. So for example, on the other side of this planter, and I don't have a photo, but I think the applicant did provide it, there are steps that go further out, down and out towards the front of the house. So this is the back of the house. So if you were to use an elevation point on the other side of that planter, meaning those steps, because the concrete is poured at grade, on grade, it's finished grade, then the elevation point would be even lower than the 110.38. Probably reducing that 17% measurement that staff took.
So if the house is cut into the hillside a little, then you measure it at the accessible point, notwithstanding any non-structural elements where the slope is at that point. Okay.
Right, it can be natural grade or finished grade.
Helps. Thank you.
I have one question. The lower elevation point is, as I understand, at the bottom of a ditch, and this ditch is a paved ditch. It's not a dirt ditch.
The project planner that originally looked at all of these details obviously is not here tonight, so I'm presenting the appeal on behalf of the review for the planner that originally looked at this. But my understanding was that staff did not have any concern about the concrete ditch, and maybe the applicant is certainly here tonight and knows his property very well and perhaps can clarify. But staff's understanding is that that concrete area is actually concrete poured on grade, so we could consider that as part of finished grade.
Any other questions for staff? I have none. Great. Will the applicant care to make a presentation? Come talk to us.
Thank you for having me this evening.
Thank you for being here.
My name is Daniel Ariff. I'm the property owner at 2520 Melody. Just to start, Mr. Roof, your question to Lisa Porras was precisely on point and will be probably the focal point of my presentation tonight. I would, however, before I get into my presentation, like to address some of the inaccuracies that Ms. Porras presented to you during her presentation. She stated that they requested a survey and one was not provided with the original plan submission to the planning department. That's incorrect. A survey was done well over a year before the plan was submitted to the planning division and was provided with the original application. I had many discussions with Brittany, a former member of the staff, with regards to that survey. Brittany had assured me that I was in compliance. These are all detailed in the emails that are part of the attachment of my original appeal that was submitted and written. And I would appreciate if that appeal, I'm not going to read that appeal to you tonight because that would just be too long. I'm hoping that your staff members have, or the commission has read that appeal and will take that into consideration as I'm including that as part of my presentation tonight. One of the other inaccuracies she mentioned, and maybe it was just a slip of the tongue, was that she said to qualify for the Hillside Overlay District, it needed both a slope of greater than 19.9% with the footprint slope of the house and with the setback to the footprint from the street setback. That's incorrect. It just needs one. It's an or. It's not both. She also said that the planter was, quote, just adjacent to my house. It's not. It's connected to the house. It's grade level at the house. And then, and we'll leave it at that for now. I would like to get into my presentation at this point. I do have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 printouts of my presentation to help you follow along. If I could give it to the commission, if that's okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So this is specifically my presentation is going to focus on dealing with the resolution that was provided with the agenda for this meeting and addressing the points that are made in that resolution. So with the paper that you have in front of you, it is basically a reproduction of the resolution, and I've added, where you can see it says applicant response, I've added my commentary and my response to the, quote, whereas statement that's been made that would need to be found correct to pass this resolution. And of course, I'm going to be proving that some of these whereas statements are not correct, and thus this resolution needs to be rejected. So we can start with the second whereas statement that I submitted plans showing the elevation points. This is correct. And all of my points submitted are supported by the St. Carlos Municipal Code as detailed in the responses that I'll be getting into as we go through this. The next whereas statement basically just states the Hillside Overlay District applicability. And again, that's just stating the code. So again, that's correct. The next statement indicates that I've submitted photos and the elevation points, and that these elevation points were taken at the top of the wall and adjacent planter. So this is more of an interesting topic, that the statement is mostly correct, but I do object to it being derogatorily called a planter, because it's being referred to by the planning division as a planter to try and diminish its value, where it's, I mean, yes, I could plant stuff in it. It could be called a planter, but it's specifically being referred to as a planter by the planning division to put it in a negative light. And I just want the commission to be aware of that it's being used in that way. Okay.
Why do you think that's a negative way of looking at it, sir?
I don't think it's a negative way of looking at it. I believe the planning division is using that word to try and make it seem like it's, because it's a planter, it's not a valid grade level to take the measurement at.
Well, that's another issue.
Right. So the next whereas statement states that the top of the wall of the planter adjacent to the building does not constitute an exterior building wall, nor supporting column of the building, nor considered part of the slope. So this statement is false, and thus the appeal should be upheld. The top of the wall, also referred to as the grade, is not an exterior building of the wall, as stated, nor a supporting column, and nor should it be. The planning division appears to be confused as to what a building footprint slope is. For clarity, as defined in the St. Carlos Municipal Code 18.12.020, the slope of the building footprint is required to be measured to provide the, quote, steepest point between opposite sides of the building. This is a very important point. Lisa Porras and/or the planning division has stated previously, quote, the planning division does not consider the adjacent planter to serve as the building footprint. This is correct, as the planter is the grade adjacent to the building footprint and not part of the building footprints itself. My apologies, that at there on the thing is and, not part of the building footprint itself. Yet this was a reason provided for rejecting the measurement in question. This shows the planning department or division does not know how to apply the SCMC in this specific case. The measurements needed to calculate the footprint slope are not measured in the wall, under the wall, over the wall, inside the wall. The measurement is at the highest grade point to the lowest grade point on opposite sides of the building that achieve this slope. The grade points are where the land meets the walls, or the closest point that can be measured, as clearly stated in SCMC 18.03.040 Section C, which I've quoted here in the letter that you have. Measurements involving a structure are made to the closest support element of the structure. In this case, the wall is the closest support element. So we're measuring the closest point to that wall. That just happens to be on top of the planter. Structures or portions of structures that are entirely underground are not included in measuring required distances. And that also comes back to the discussion we had before my presentation between Mr. Roof and Ms. Porras. Ms. Porras was implying that we could measure under the building, and that is not correct. The planning department in their staff report dated July 10, 2019, give these two definitions. Grade, the location of the ground surface. Existing grade, the elevation of the ground at any point on a lot as shown on the required survey submitted in conjunction with the application for a building permit or grading permit. Existing grade may also be referred to as natural grade. So in this case, whether we're referring to existing grade, natural grade, it's all the same. These two definitions show that I'm 100% correct in using the correct location for the measurement provided in the application, the measurement at the top of the wall. The survey point in question was made at the closest point that they, the survey company, could make it to support the element of the structure, the wall, at the existing grade, the top of the wall, which was also the level of the dirt at the time of the measurement. Thus, the measurement at the, quote, planter adjacent to the building, end quote, and this measurement not being, quote, an exterior building wall, not supporting column of the building, is exactly where the code requires the survey measurement to be taken in this specific case. Thus, the next statement in the whereas, quote, nor considered part of the slope, quote, is incorrect, and thus renders the planning department ruling incorrect. Lisa Porras has also stated previously, quote, therefore, the footprint slope provided by the applicant does not reflect the overall grade of the lot, end quote. This again shows the Planning Division's misunderstanding and misapplication of the code. The footprint slope and the overall grade of the lot are two very different things. The code states that we need to use the footprint slope and nowhere mentions the overall grade of the lot. Again, the provided measurement, 113.6 feet, is the required point by code SCMC 1812.020 to calculate the slope with the steepest point between opposite sides of the building, also referred to as the footprint slope, and thus the applicant's appeal must be upheld, and thus this resolution rejected. Move on to the next whereas statement, which states, whereas slope refers to topography or grade as referenced in San Carlos Municipal Code, and 4 codes are referenced. I'm going to go through each 4 codes and discuss them with you. SCMC 1803.040, Section B states, distances are measured horizontally. When determining distances for setbacks and structure dimensions, all distances are measured along a horizontal plane from the appropriate line, edge of building, structure, storage area, parking area, or other object. These distances are not measured following the topography or slope of the land. This code continues to verify that my measurements submitted in my application are correct. The footprint slope is calculated using a distance of 59.11 feet across the footprint of my house as determined and calculated by the survey company. This measurement is measured as required by not following the topography or slope of the land, just the footprint of the building. Again, this code confirms that this is the correct measurement to use. The second code referenced, SCMC 1716.030, Section D, states, determination of cross slope. In all cases, the cross slope of an area shall be determined for land in its natural state or as altered pursuant to previous authorization by the city. The formula set forth in the subsection B of the section shall be used to determine cross slopes. This code section is irrelevant to this appeal and ruling since it refers to a cross slope. The relevant section 1812.020 requires a footprint slope, not a cross slope, which is what SCMC 1716.030 Section D refers to. To further support this is 100% irrelevant, SCMC 17.08.050 defines a cross slope as the average grade or slope. The code we are discussing, 1812.020, specifically says it requires the slope to be measured at the steepest point between opposite sides of the building and not an average slope. So again, this code section is irrelevant. The next code section, SCMC 1812.040, Section D states, all areas of the site not under structures with a final slope greater than 15% shall be left uncovered by impervious surface and may be disturbed only as may be necessary to develop the site. Again, this code is irrelevant to this appeal and ruling. It is unclear why the Planning Commission has included this code. However, this code supports my application. 1, if the Planning Department is saying the planter needs to be uncovered by impervious surface, it is. The dirt is impervious. Is pervious, my mistake, is pervious. 2, if the Planning Department is saying that the area may only be disturbed to develop the site, that is exactly what we were doing with my application, attempting to develop the site. The next code section referenced, SCMC 1708.050 states, cross slope means the average grade or slope of a parcel or area expressed as a percentage of vertical difference in elevation of horizontal distance and determined by the cross slope formula in the lot size requirements in section 1716.050 of this title. Again, as addressed in the first portion of this section, this code is irrelevant to this appeal and ruling. The code, again, 18.12.020, requires a footprint slope, not a cross slope. This code defines a cross slope as the average grade or slope, and the code we're discussing, 18.12.020, requires it to be measured at the steepest points, not the average slope. So again, thus shown of the 4 code sections seemingly randomly referenced in this section, 1 confirms that my application was done correctly, and the other 3 are irrelevant to my application. And thus, again, my appeal must be upheld and this resolution rejected. The next whereas statement. The existing planter wall filled with dirt is a contrived device to create a grade where none exists. Thus, the planter is not considered part of the ground. My response, the statement says that the existing planter wall filled with dirt is a contrived device to create a grade where none exists, confirms the planning division admits that this, quote, planter is grade level. The planning division wants to reject this grade and use the grade under the planter or beside the planter. As stated in my appeal, this, quote, planter is a landmass that is permanent and it is not isolated or freestanding. And this landmass is continuous to the grade ground level that not only surrounds my property, but is the grade ground level of my neighboring properties. Again, measuring from the top of this, quote, planter is required by CMC 18.12.020, as the slope of the building footprint is required to be measured to provide the steepest point between opposite sides of the building. The whereas statement also contains the portion stating that the, quote, planter is a contrived device. Again, this is irrelevant. While we could argue about whether it is a contrived device or not, we don't need to. The code makes no distinction regarding contrived devices. In fact, if you look at any project, virtually every device is contrived. Virtually all lots, projects are regraded to some extent to fit the design of the project and thus are contrived. Specifically with my house, I've included a west elevation diagram in front of you. The flat areas of this diagram are contrived to be flat. And the existing stairs are definitely contrived, providing multiple grades along the side of my house. The landing area of the stairs is 100% contrived. The land was definitely not in the shape of stairs and a landing pad before the development of my house. My backyard is relatively flat as well. However, my property lies lower than some of my surrounding neighbors. The grade of my whole backyard is contrived, as the retaining walls that surround most of my backyard adjust the grade specifically to make my backyard flatter. Again, the code makes no distinction regarding contrived devices, and thus cannot be rejected for this reason. The second statement in this whereas appears to use this justification, this incorrect justification of it being a contrived device to state, thus the planter is not considered part of the ground. Since we've just determined that it is not, that it being or not being a contrived device has no bearing on the situation, again, this statement is incorrect and provides no justification for reaching its conclusion, and thus the applicant's appeal must be upheld and this resolution rejected. And there's a few more whereas statements in there that state relatively factual information, so we'll skip over those and skip down to the now therefore it be resolved section. And I'll just recap that as shown for any of the statements that have been made by the planning division, I apologize, I have commission there, planning division. None of the reasons for rejecting my application are valid, and thus the applicant's appeal must be upheld and this resolution rejected. Thank you very much for your attention.
Good, thank you very much. Questions for our appellant?
When did you build the planter?
Years ago.
What was there before the planter or before the wall, whatever attribute you'd like to call it? What was there before?
Empty space.
Yeah, it looks as though there's stairs. So could you have walked out of the backyard and down the stairs?
Still do, yes.
Got it.
And then how do you get over the planter?
I have I either walk over it, I go up I use a little step ladder.
On both sides?
No, I'm physically able to do it.
Jump over?
Sure, yes.
I see.
Is the survey that is up on here, is this, did you provide that, or? Yeah.
That was done. That survey was done well over a year before the application was submitted to the Planning Division. As I mentioned, I was talking to Brittany, I believe a former member of the Planning Division, who said I was required to get one. I got one at her behest, and then had discussions with her with that survey. As detailed in the emails of my written appeal, those emails, she did raise this issue with regard to qualifying for the homeowner Hillside Overlay District. She did indicate in those emails that she would take it to a staff meeting, and she did. And I spoke to her after the staff meeting, and she said there are no further concerns. Lisa Porras has said that, quote, she doesn't remember this staff meeting. So it's unfortunate that Brittany isn't here to say anything about it, but the emails confirm that this issue was discussed with Brittany in the Planning Division, and then after the meeting, she said the meeting had happened. There was no further, in the emails with her, there was no further discussion of this issue, and we were discussing other issues to do with the planning of this project.
But the data presented in the survey is still valid?
Correct.
Yeah, okay, good, thank you.
Thank you. Yep.
There's no way anyone could consider that planter a landmass. Why didn't you use the eave? It would be the same argument that you make.
No, because the eave isn't connected to the ground outside of the footprint of the building.
Maybe a different question in the same vein. When, whatever you want to call that structure was built, what was the rationale for making it the height that it is? Why not?
Because I believe I would have needed a permit to make it bigger.
And why not lower?
Seemed like a good height for actually, one of the main purposes for building the wall was for my children to not be able to climb over it and for balls to bounce back into my yard instead of going down the stairs.
Okay, but when the house was built, it wasn't there, and so it's actually not holding up the house or anything.
And neither is, yes, that's correct. And neither though are any of the other land around the house that we're using for the survey points.
Thank you.
What's underneath the cinder block structure that's holding the earth?
What's underneath the cinder block?
Is that constructed on top of the patio? From the picture we're seeing,
I
it
honestly
looks
don't
like
remember if I removed the cement there or not. I don't remember.
Thank you.
Did you build the concrete drain?
I built the concrete drain? No.
Do you know when it was built?
No, I don't.
Did you buy the house when it was first built, or
No, I did not.
how many years?
I've been in the house for approximately 9 years, 10 years now.
Thank you.
Commissioner Garvey, any questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Maybe at this time, let's turn it over to any other members of the public that would like to comment. And if you have, please come on up and bring your slip and then step up to the microphone. Good. Thank you very much. Nicholas.
Yes, Nicholas. Thank you to everyone who came here today, and thanks for giving me a chance to speak. My name is Nicholas Chua, and I'm the son of the family who lives behind the house in question. I want to start by saying I completely understand why someone would want to add a third floor to their house, and I understand why they'd want to appeal the decision. And our family has additional concerns not related to this definition, which we could bring up later, but I would like to address the issues that we just talked about right now. Specifically, I'd like to push back on the argument that the plantar is part of the existing grade, and I'd like the committee to consider the spirit of the law rather than arbitrary applications of it. Just because something is attached to the ground doesn't make it a ground, and it doesn't make it a grade. Please imagine just for a second that I erected a 20-foot wall connected to the floor near my house. it would instantly give my house the grade necessary to qualify for these conditions if you were to use it as the highest point. This is an unrealistic proposition, in my opinion, but it is only a factor different of what is proposed here today. Superfluous additions to a property do not change the ground, hence the topography, or a property. Allowing additions to be used as part of the grade is to excuse my pun, a slippery slope to loose interpretations. Again, I completely understand why you would want to add a third story, but I urge the city and the committee to consider the spirit of the law when considering this decision. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments? Why don't we first see if the other commission members, and then, yeah.
Your property is back to back with the applicants?
So if this is the hill coming up and this is their house, ours is right here. So our fences connect.
Your backyard fences connect?
Is connected to that property.
Okay.
Thank you.
Are you in the Hillside Overlay District? Your lot?
I don't believe we qualify for that.
I don't believe so either.
Yeah, we're on Glasgow Lane. I don't think so. I'd be happy to answer questions.
Thank you. Mr. Arif, would you care to step up to the mic? And this is in response to the gentleman we just heard, yes?
Correct.
Yeah, thank you.
I just wanted to address the 20-foot wall issue that the gentleman raised, and thank you for your comments. I appreciate them. There's two issues with the 20-foot wall that he mentioned in referring to trying to adjust the grade, is that in this specific case, there are two walls with dirt in between it, so that actually establishes a big difference between building a single 20-foot wall, and the other big difference between building a 20-foot wall is he'd be required to have a permit to build a 20-foot wall. So, thank you.
Thank you. Other members of the public like to speak? Thank you. Russ Berman.
Yes.
Russ, welcome.
So I'd like to thank the commission and also Lisa, who's helped me a great deal over the last couple of months as I've gathered information about this project. First, I want to address Daniel, who's, I'm next door to Nicholas. So Daniel is my neighbor to my rear. Nobody likes to be in these situations. I have absolutely nothing against you or your family. I hope we can walk away continuing to be neighbors regardless of how this is adjudicated. So that's important to me. So Nicholas stole a little bit of my thunder. He made some of the same arguments that I was going to make, so I will second those. I also had the somewhat contrived example of, I would like to build a three-sided box in my yard and abut it to my house and put dirt in it and say, yep, okay, now I'm part of the Hillside Overlay. Let's have an arms race, and he's going to build 3 stories. I want to build 3 stories. I have a wonderful bay view that's going to be completely disappeared by this. I'd like that bay view, so I'll be coming to you later and saying, okay, well, if you're going to apply the law in this way, please apply it to me so I can peer over the top of his house as I currently, currently do. We've had a lot of readings of the code already. I'll bore you slightly with yet another reading of the code, 18.41.020. Any structure having a roof supported by columns or walls and intended for the shelter, housing, or enclosure of any individual animal, process, equipment, goods, or materials is what the definition of building is. And the footprint slope is intended to be measured between opposite sides of the building. So that planter, which wasn't even there several years ago, it's not part of the building. I understand the point that Daniel is making about a landmass abutting the side of the building and having to use external measurements because you can't very well measure underneath the building. But that's not what footprint slope is, right? Footprint slope is supposed to be the lowest point on one side of the building to the highest point on the other at grade. Grade is ground. If I pulled the bottom cinder block out of that, then that ground is going to fall down, right? If you zoom into this picture, it's gardening mulch or something along those lines. It's not impacted soil on which the house can rest. That wasn't there before it was added. And thus my point about adding a three-sided planter or whatever you want to call it. In her introduction, Lisa mentioned massing and said that that's something that would be considered down the line if you were to uphold the appeal tonight, which I hope you do not, but I'll bring it up anyway since I have my 2 minutes. Section 18.29.060, which is design review criteria, specifically states the project must be designated to be compatible with neighboring development by, emphasis mine, avoiding big differences in building scale and character between developments on adjoining lots. I have one of those adjoining lots. Here are some of my neighbors that have other adjoining lots. I hope that you read my comments, which are included in the packet that Al and Lisa published recently. I went to Zillow, which is probably not the world's greatest authority in fact, but nevertheless, all these, basically in our neighborhood, most of these houses were built in the same 1 or 2 year period. They're all on similar size lots. They're all similar size houses. With the additional 1,000 square foot in question here, the development in question would wind up being something like 80% bigger than all the other adjoining houses on average, and there won't be anything even remotely close to it. So, you know, there's definitely, the law doesn't necessarily state what significant means. I'm saying 80%, I'm appealing to you. 80% to me seems pretty significant. So anyway, in conclusion, hopefully the appeal is not upheld. I think, to me, I don't do this for a living, but to me it's pretty cut and dry. That planter was built after the fact, and if it weren't there, then it would be 17%. It would not merit the hillside overlay designation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before you go, just to check, see if there's any questions from fellow commissioners.
So you live behind him just diagonal, so a point of your backyard is adjacent to the applicant's backyard?
I'd say that my house probably is about 60% of his backyard line, something like that, and their house is the other 40%.
I see. Thank you.
Approximately.
Do you know of any other 3-story houses in that neighborhood?
I drove the neighborhood specifically to answer that question. If you drive up Melendi for about 3/4 of a mile, which is the distance from Alameda de las Pulgas to this property, I can't find any others. On Glasgow, which is definitely flat, where all of us live, there are none. And on Melendi, Daniel may correct me, I don't think there are any there either.
No, they're not.
No, I don't think so, no. And so that's another significant difference, which goes back to the design review code.
Good, thank you very much. Appreciate your comments. Yes, please.
So just to address his comments, and thank you again, and I do hope to remain friends with all my neighbors after this. Just to address some of the points that unfortunately the fact that it was or was not there when the house was built is unfortunately irrelevant to the situation. It's what the grade is now at the time of the application, and the grade is where that planter is. So whether it was the time of the building of it is unfortunately irrelevant to the application. He made a point about pulling a block out from the bottom and the dirt coming out of it. Absolutely, it would. Just as if we took a sledgehammer to the stairs along the side of my house, that would affect the grade there as well, as dirt would come pouring out of there as well. So again, that's unfortunately irrelevant. The grade is where it's at right now. It's being held up. The dirt is there. It's being held up by the walls, just as dirt around my house is being supported by the concrete and the stairs around my house. So unfortunately, that's irrelevant as well. He did mention the massing. That's not part of this ruling, so I'm actually not going to address that at this point. Unfortunately, there was a little bit of inaccuracy there, but that can be for a later date if we get to that point. With regards to heights of buildings, though, approximately, I don't know, about 100 yards up. Oh, so let's actually take a step back with the map that's in front of you of the of the neighborhood. One big consideration here, which doesn't actually, it's more for context because it's irrelevant to the actual appeal, is that Glasgow Lane is a relatively flat street, and all the houses along it are probably at about a 0% grade, or 0% slope rather, approximately. Whereas the houses on Melody Drive, especially my house, and going down the hill, which would be to the right as you're looking at that diagram, the grades increase significantly, or the slopes increase significantly as we're going downhill. So my house, so the houses behind me are all don't have basements, don't have crawl. I'm assuming don't have crawl spaces, but definitely don't have basements. Whereas the houses on my side of Melody do. Across the street from me is actually houses that are built probably 50, 60, 70 years before my house. So my house is in a very different section of the, quote, neighborhood than the neighbors behind myself. And Russ may not remember this because he moved in a few years ago, but before he moved in, there was actually a rather large tree blocking his view of the bay. So he's actually very fortunate that I cut that tree down. Otherwise, his view would have been blocked anyway. So, but I just wanted to point out that it's a very different, quote, neighborhood on my side of the street than the Glasgow side of the street. Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much. Any other public comment? Yes, please. Yeah, please. Heinz Hoffman. Heinz, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for your time tonight. I am one of the original owners of the homes at Highlands. It's called Santa Carlos Highlands, and I'm also currently a resident there still. And I just want to give you a little overlay of that whole development. It was built in between 1989 and 1991. It's on site of the original Santa Carlos High School. And I'm sure you've been up there recently. You'll notice there's 5 tennis courts at the end of our block. There's playing fields and so forth. A lot of kids enjoy soccer. But in 1980s, White Cliff Homes built 86 homes on that site of the high school. And the 86 homes encompass Aberdeen, Glasgow, Dundee, and also Melody. And the homes we're talking about on Melody were built by White Cliff at the exact same time and have all very similar characters. We all have the exact same similar roofs. They're all cement tile roofs, and they all have, as I said, similar heights. And other than the one-story homes, they have one-story homes and two-story homes. All of the two-story homes have 4 bedrooms and vary in different sizes interior-wise. But the exterior of all these homes are well-kept. They're very sought after, and they have a very similar character. Being there almost 30 years now, I walk the block nightly after my dinner, and I will tell you that there have been roof repairs, but not even a person that has changed any of the roofs that are existing right now. And there has, in answer to Mr. Bradley's question, I can tell you and contest to this, that there has not been one additional room or floor put on any of these homes out of 86 of them, including all the homes that were built on Melody by Mr. Peterson, the president of White Cliff Homes. So that's just an overview of the neighborhood. When I bought my home, I had an opportunity to select from maybe 6 different lots. I selected Glasgow. I'm at 113 Glasgow Lane right now. And I will tell you this, that I selected because it had southern exposure, the backyards were flat, and you could only see the roof lines of all the homes in Melody at the time. So it provided my wife and I and our 3 children ample privacy. The children have now moved on and grown up, but now I have grandchildren there. So I am very concerned about another addition going up on these homes. Because as I saw from the pictures tonight, there are windows on the east side of this additional 1-story floor that's being erected or proposed to be erected, and that would give straight view line into my lot, and I will lose privacy. I just want to say I did read the proposal by the homeowner for the addition, and one of the comments he made was he wanted to build the addition to enhance his views. And I will say that he wishes to do that at the expense of changing the character of the neighborhood, of blocking our views on Glasgow Lane, and also eliminating our privacy. So I strongly oppose the building, and I hope that you take our comments into consideration and vote in our favor. Yeah, any questions at all?
Thank you very much. Questions? None for me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I just ask, pardon? Let me see if there are other public comments. And if you have maybe one or two more comments, please come share them so we can make sure that everyone's voices are in, all right? No. I don't see anyone else asking, so please come on up. All right, good. Do I have a motion to close the public comment period?
I'll move to close the public comment period.
Second.
So moved. Roll call.
Commissioner Roof?
Yes.
Commissioner Garvey?
Yes.
Commissioner Bradley?
Yes.
Vice Chair Iacoponi?
Yes.
I have a question or two for the staff, probably from the City Attorney Greg, about how to think about some of this. And some of the points were raised concerning the process of the application and how the city handled that. And I wonder how I should take that stuff into account or not. Are we evaluating this on the basis of the merits of it, or are we supposed to look at that process?
Well, first of all, I think it's stated in the staff report that there was no final decision of staff on this particular issue until later on in the process. So planner making a comment over the counter is not a basis for reliance or any kind of estoppel argument that an applicant might make. I think it's the issue before you tonight is the appeal of the staff determination that this parcel does not qualify for the hillside overlay zoning treatment. And that's something for you to decide based upon the evidence that you've heard tonight about this planter or cinder block wall, whatever you want to call it. It looks like a planter to me when I look at the pictures because it's filled with dirt, but although it has no plants in it. So I don't know if there's an intention to put plants in it or not. I think one of the things that's going to be relevant for you is from the staff report is the intention of the hillside overlay ordinance and what that plan is, and the definitions. You've heard enough about that tonight and what the definitions are, and whether or not this change in that was placed on the property meets within the definitions that you can look at the slope, at the percentage slope, and what the actual grade is for this property and what the appropriate measurement would be. So staff has prepared this resolution. You've heard a lot of testimony about it and some argument. But when I look at it, I'm just going to summarize what I think I've heard tonight. But again, the decision's up to you. Is we have the property owner at some point in the past built this cinder block planter or wall adjacent to his structure without a permit. When I look at page 63 of the photographs, I see that it's not actually connected to the house. It's touching the house, but it's not part of the structure of the house. It actually has, the picture I'm looking at on page 63, I think that proves that it's not part of the structure, is there's a drain pipe that goes through it. That's a downspout from the house. So it's clearly not part of the house structure. And so staff's interpretation is you cannot create an artifice or contrive something to adjust the grade of the slope as that was built at the house by doing this. You're doing something without a permit, and the city's regulations are intended to address hillside properties that this is sort of an exception to the ordinance, if you will, because the ordinance, the hillside overlay, is trying to recognize that steep slopes, it may be difficult and not feasible to build a house within the 28 feet. So there's an exception to the general rule. And then I'll close. It wasn't really discussed tonight, and that's why I'm going to bring it up. When you look at the code that's in the resolution, there's another statement in there that I think is important for your consideration. Let me find it here. It's on page 31 of your packet, and it's the last sentence of the third whereas. It says, in the event of a conflict between the provisions of this chapter and any underlying base district, the most restrictive provisions shall apply. So what are the most restrictive, in my read of the most restrictive provisions is you pick of the two, you're going to pick the most restrictive if there's a conflict. So now we've got an argument here that somebody's making, well, this is my grade, or this is the other grade, this is the actual grade. I think you can, when you look at that code section, you can decide what's the most restrictive and then make your judgment based on that. So I'll close with that part. If you have any other questions of me, I'd be glad to answer them. Actually, the public hearing's closed now, so we've closed the record. So I'm trying to assist the Planning Commission in making their decision. It is ultimately their decision, but I'm giving the benefit of some of the thoughts that I have about the problem that they're seeing tonight.
I'll move we reopen the public hearing.
You're allowed to do that if that's what the commission would like to do.
I'll second.
Commissioner Roof?
Yes, once.
Commissioner Garvey?
Yes.
Commissioner Bradley?
Yes.
Vice Chair Iacopone?
Yes.
Thank you. I'll be very quick. In just answering Mr. Roof's question, in addition to what Mr. Rubin said, my reading of the law, and I'm not a lawyer, but my reading of the law, there's a line in there that Ms. Porras put forth that said when you are deciding the result of an appeal, you have to use the same information that the planning department used when they decided, right? So if you're asking, well, given that there was some difference in what Mr. Arif was told at one point along the way, do you take that into account? My understanding is, well, no, you're supposed to use the same laws and the same information that the planning department was used. That's how I read that code. Ms. Porras can maybe read out what the actual code says, but that's what my memory is. Thank you.
Yes, since we opened public comment back up and you're part of the public, please comment.
I just wanted to address 2 points that the commission's lawyer had made. He was trying to use the drain spout as an example of why this potentially might not be the correct measurement to use. That drain spout goes directly into the ground, or went directly into the ground before this planter was built. So now it goes directly into the ground at the top of that planter. So it's exactly the same situation. So that's irrelevant, what the lawyer has mentioned about the drain spout. And then about the restrictive codes to be able to now arbitrarily choose which grade points to use. That's unfortunately incorrect. The code requires you to use the highest and lowest point that provide the slope, and this is the highest point. So we can't arbitrarily now use another point. So that's unfortunately incorrect information as well. Thank you very much.
Good, thank you. Do I have a motion to reclose public comment?
I'll move that we reclose the public comment period.
I'll second.
Second that.
I got Vice Chair Iacopone as the seconder. Did I?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Commissioner Roof?
Yes.
Commissioner Garvey?
Yes.
Commissioner Bradley?
Yes.
Vice Chair Iacopone?
Yes. I would just say to my fellow commissioners that I think this idea that at the time that this structure, whatever we want to call it, was built, if it had been chosen to be built 1 foot for plants, we might likely end up with a different discussion and a different calculation, and might not even be here discussing the matter. And if, assuming permits had been granted, it had been built at 7 foot or 6 foot, we might have yet another calculation. So I guess it doesn't seem like that something that was built after the fact, to my eye, resonates with the notion of the grade, which would appear to be the sidewalk, and where the sidewalk hits the house and hits the other planter area, hits the other retaining walls, and that grade seems to my eye to make the most sense in the context of that this was added after the fact, and so it's just difficult to see how something which is an added structure should have merit in this conversation of measuring what the highest point would be and therefore the slope.
And building on that, I see that I believe it's the intent of the code that there be no artificial grade. And as was mentioned, the planter was built after the fact, creating an artificial grade.
A question for Greg. Mr. Aref said something along the lines that really all slopes are contrived, and therefore these arguments that the planter is a contrived thing isn't applicable. I wonder if all slopes are contrived, how do we have a hillside overlay district?
Well, I'll have to defer some of the technical details to the staff about how the measurements are done, but when I look at this, I'm seeing this unpermitted structure that's being argued that's making a new grade when it seems like its only purpose is contrived to get around or to comply with some definition that doesn't apply in this instance. And it's another term is, I said it earlier, it's like an artifice. It's like I'm just going to stick something up higher and I'm going to call it the new grade and I'm going to make a slope out of it, and I'm going to measure from that point. And arguing that you have to use that point seems to me to be without merit. You don't use a point that's not the valid point. You use the valid point. And the valid point that staff is arguing is the grade where the backyard is, where people walk around outside of the backyard, not some elevated planter box where you filled it with dirt, to say that's now the grade. That's just, it doesn't make sense to me. The code has never read that way. I've been doing this for 30 years at the Planning Commission almost, and I've never seen anyone argue that my new subsequently built planter box now entitles me to certain other rights that I wouldn't otherwise get. So I think it's a pretty clear case to me that this is not what the code intends. It's an artifice. It's a device to create something, and that's why one of the reasons, in addition to the other findings and statements in the staff report and the resolution, that we're recommending that you deny the appeal.
I have a question about in the resolution, there's the part about the planter adjacent to the building does not constitute an exterior building wall nor supporting column of the building. And I understand, I think, both Mr. Aref's comment that and Lisa's. I think there's a legitimate argument that that's relevant or not. But does it have to be part in this resolution? Let's say that part is deemed invalid, but I'm thinking that the part that may be valid is that it's not considered part of the slope, which is the essence of that the planter is not considered part of the slope. I don't care whether it's part of the exterior wall And so having these connected in that sentence makes me nervous, because if you say this part of that sentence is wrong, therefore end of show. And so can these be separated? Are they freestanding elements?
I can try to explain why staff included this in the resolution. Certainly in the applicability criteria of the Hillside Overlay District, which is on the packet page 26, refers to footprint slope of 19.9% or greater. And it also refers to the steepest point between opposite sides of the building. So in our analysis, we took those words very carefully. We looked up the definition of footprint. And under footprint, the definition of footprint is a horizontal area, as seen in plan view, of a building or structure, measured from the outside of the exterior walls and supporting columns and excluding eaves. That is the reason why staff incorporated that into one of the findings for denial, because we did not find that footprint, the element, the wall, the planter, however we choose to call it this evening, did not meet the definition of footprint, which does reference the building or structure. The commission could choose to disagree with staff's reasoning for including that in the proposed draft resolution and take it out, remove it, strike it, separate it. If you don't feel that is a key part of the finding, any findings that you wish to make this evening, and instead just keep in the portion about the slope. That's entirely, I believe, up to the commission.
I'm thinking that it may or may not be a correct part of it, and so I haven't come to an opinion on it, the correctness of that bit. But I am tending to believe that the top of the dirt in that land feature is not really part of the slope, and so I'm looking for a way to have those be separate. Maybe separate whereases, and so that they're not inextricably tied together. You know what I mean? Part of the argument Mr. Arif was giving us was because he had a challenge to the conclusion about the edge of the structure. I hate to have that get in the way of the more obvious conclusion that the top of that dirt is not part of the slope. That's sort of a technical point. I'm sort of looking for a robust resolution here, where the different elements are, where if one turns out not to be valid, the others still are. Can you just put a line return after the word building? Period.
That's certainly, through the chair, up to the commission. If they agree with your change in language, that's certainly within your purview.
I respect the comment. I think, from the way I've read the material and listened tonight, I'm zeroing in on, are we talking about 110.38? Are we talking about 113.16? And I think there's a lot of common sense that says the sidewalk is where it is, and I think we've captured that in the resolution, and I'm personally not as concerned about the issue that you point out. So for my part, I'd pass on it. But
To me, the Hillside Ordinance District language and intent of the law is clear. The planter is not a landmass or a grade. Adjacent, existing, or proposed. The staff's measurements were correct. They did try to help you and continue to offer to help you. I vote for denial, but encourage you to work on a redesign. That being said, I move that the Planning Commission adopt a resolution denying the appeal filed by Danielle Arif and find that the property at 2520 Melody Drive does not meet the applicability criteria of the City of San Carlos Hillside Overlay District.
I'll second.
Should I call?
Yes.
Commissioner Roof?
Yes.
Commissioner Garvey?
Yes.
Commissioner Bradley?
Yes.
And Vice Chair Iacoponi?
Yes.
This item can be appealed to the City Council pursuant to the municipal code. So I'm just informing the appellant if he chooses to do that. He has a limited time to do that. I think it's 10 days.
I'd like to thank all the parties present here tonight. I know this is an issue that is of concern to you. You've expressed your views, and I know maintaining good neighbor relations during times when there's differences of opinion is difficult. So thanks for making best efforts to do that. We appreciate it. We're now in the next part of the evening, reports, correspondence, and general information. And our first item is, are there any reports on recent city council actions?
Yes, this evening I would like to make a report to the Commission that the City Council recently took action on the Planning Commission's recommendation to make changes to the city's below market rate housing ordinance. This was an item that was presented to you at your last meeting, and it has since then gone before the City Council and was adopted. So those changes will go into effect after the second reading of the ordinance. The ordinance is taken under consideration. That's all I have. Did you have anything else, Al, or nope. That's it for City Council?
Great, thank you very much. Colleagues, any planning commissioner comments or reports?
I noticed Mr. Alsave's picture was on the Daily Journal last week on housing. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Front page.
Yep.
A recent shot or something?
No, it wasn't. I look a few years younger in that photo there.
Well, congratulations.
Yeah.
Is there any correspondence to report for the evening?
No correspondence, but it would be helpful for staff to have as part of the record a copy of Mr. Aref's handout that he gave to the Commission. I don't believe there are extra copies for staff, so I feel that's important to have as part of the record. If you would like an electronic copy, I could scan it and send it to the Commission. So please let me know. Other than that, no correspondence for this evening.
Good. Thank you very much, Lisa. And then any other comments, reports, updates on current projects or outlook over the next couple of meetings?
Absolutely. And so at our last meeting, I made reference to the fact that the Commission may have an August 5th regular meeting. Normally, we'd like to give the Commission 2 meetings in August off so that you can enjoy the summer break, similar to what Council does. We did have 2 items that look like they were going to be ready on August 5th. There is a chance they may not be. Things are always in flux. So I will be sending out an update within the next day or 2 to let the Commission know whether we will also be canceling the August 5th meeting. But as of now, just stay tuned to that. I will be sending out an email shortly.
Great, thank you very much. Very good. Well, I think we've reached the end of our agenda. So here at 8:40, meeting adjourned.